Deputy Murphy.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mr. Daly and Mr. McDonough and to your officials. I just wanted to ask a quick question, Mr. McDonough, from your opening statement before I wanted to ask the CNAG a couple of questions. You spoke about 14.1 billion in asset sales to date. Does that include Project Eagle? 14.1 billion?
No, because it hasn't completed yet.
So when that completes, that additional 5.7 billion?
No, the 5.7 billion is the par debt value of the loan.
Okay.
Yeah, so unfortunately we didn't get 5.7 billion back for the loan because the value of security was much less than that.
So what are we expecting to get back?
It's been speculated that we get 1.6 billion back.
1.6. And when's that due to complete?
We're in a final stage of due diligence with the preferred buyer, so hopefully by the end of June.
End of June. Okay. Thank you. And if I could just ask the CNAG a couple of questions about the report. How many drafts were prepared of this report before it was completed?
Many.
Many.
But not all would have been circulated to the entity, to either NAMA or to the Department of Finance. There were 3 drafts that were shared with NAMA and with the Department of Finance.
And when does the process begin in terms of they're able to comment on the draft? Is it?
Of course, yes. That's the point of sending the drafts for clearance. We ask them, we invite them to give their comments, just to make any corrections if they detect something that needs to be corrected, and then to make comments or suggestions for additional material to be included or material to be taken out. We make the judgment then as to...
There's no obligation on you. It's your decision as to what stands in the report.
Oh, absolutely, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And, I mean, there was full cooperation with the Department and with NAMA, as far as you're concerned, in that process?
There was certainly full cooperation in providing comments, yes.
Okay. And were any of the recommendations changed as a result of that process?
There might have been slight adjustments in the wording or precision of the wording. I don't recall particularly. We would have maybe between, let's say, the first draft and the second draft, we would have sharpened the focus of the recommendations, perhaps. But that would be my
substantial change.
No, that would be my judgment and my decision.
Okay. And just to clarify the parameters then, the statutory obligations to cover the first 3 years of NAMA, but the report does reference activities in 2013.
It does.
2014.
Yeah. Just in terms of the timing of the report when it was being prepared, it became clear that there were actually changes happening in the in the markets and so on. So we did want to try and have it as relevant as we could at the time we were publishing it.
So when you put in with certain findings, say for relation to data performance or expected gains or property disposals, they can be seen as timely as to the view as of this year, or?
Well, I think we've tried wherever we've given a finding to explain precisely what time period it relates to. For instance, I think we present on page 56 the outcome in relation to loans sold from the inception of NAMA to the end of 2012. Obviously, if there were sales in 2013, they wouldn't have been included in that. But the same kind of analysis could be done of sales in 2013, 2014, and so on. Okay. And I would envisage that when we come back to do this next time out, we would try and present disposals in the first period as compared to disposals in the second period.
Okay. Just 2 other questions then. The 15% that's held, that's managed by the banks.
Yes.
Did you look at that?
Yes, we would.
You looked at that. Okay, that is included. And then in relation to the review of property disposals, you looked at the generation of 1 billion to the disposal of 144 properties. That's about 10% of what NAMA has achieved to date, is it? Is that correct?
Yes, it would.
Is that a big enough sample to get a proper view?
Well, I think there's a practicality around it, but I would feel it would be a reasonable. Yeah, and it's bigger than a standard sample.
Bigger than a standard sample.
Yeah.
Okay.
It would be. I think it's a sufficient sample. Certainly.
Thank you. Mr. McDonough, if I may, in relation to the 15% that's held by the banks, I mean technically that's in NAMA, but it's been managed by staff in the banks. Is that?
Yeah, it's managed by staff in AIB, Bank of Ireland, and now Capita, because IBRC is no longer in existence.
And are they paid by NAMA or are they paid by the banks?
They're paid by NAMA. We pay a fee, which is approved by the European Commission, which is the lower of cost, are 10 basis points. And the cost last year, I think, were about 7.8 basis points.
The Senior Juniors report raised a concern about the knowledge of the level of impairment in those assets in the banks, that the 12% figure might not be accurate.
Yeah.
I mean, are you taking a bit of a hands-off approach with?
No. I think it was a feature brought up in 2012, as I think we explained here before, Deputy, is that NAMA took a view that we deal with the biggest debtors first, which made up the majority of the portfolio. So the biggest debtors are the top 200 debtors. They made up 61 billion of the 74 billion we acquired. And the other 600 debtors we managed by the banks because they had smaller exposures. So we spent all our time up to 2012 looking at those biggest debtors because we felt that's what the Pareto principle, that's what the biggest risk in terms of making sure that we knew what was going on with those portfolios. They had the bigger assets, things of the day. And what we have done since is that even in our 2013 report, we have increased the impairment on those smaller debtors, 600 debtors, from 12% to 23%. And as we've done a comprehensive review of those debtors, and we have a final piece of work to do to that, which we've committed to as part of CNAG's recommendation, is that by the 30th of June this year, we'll have completed that work in full, and that means then we'll have a full oversight of the whole 800 debtors that's in the NAMA book.
Wasn't a great strategy, though, given the findings that the CNAG found in terms of the smaller debtors actually having a greater impairment versus the larger debtors who had he talks about an inverse relationship.
But I don't accept it wasn't a great strategy, definitely. We had to deal with, in terms of trying to build up the organisation and deal with the biggest debtors first. The smallest debtors, we sort of took a view with an agreement with the CNAG that we look at them on a general impairment basis. And now we're actually going to move by the 30th of June that all 800 debtors will be looked on a specific basis, every single debtor on a debtor-by-debtor basis. So it was a function of time.
And will that review will be completed in time for the Department of Finance's review of now the next report that's coming?
There's potentially there'd be a reasonable indication, probably. Yeah.
Reasonable indication.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And then the 15% that's held on banks, that's it's property, it's assets or portfolios below 75 million. Was that the threshold?
Below par debt of 75 million. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But initially, when NAMA was established, it was 5 million was the threshold for moving into NAMA. Is that correct? And even if you're performing,
there was no threshold in relation to AIB and Bank of Ireland. The threshold was 20 million, but in terms of the other institutions, there was no threshold.
Did that change at all, those figures, in terms of, I mean, the 20 million, did that threshold increase or decrease?
No. At one stage, at the end of the last government, there was discussions with the central bank about moving those sub 20 million loans in AIB and Bank of Ireland into NAMA. And when the new government came in, they agreed with the central bank and the European Commission that those loans of 20 million or less in AIB and Bank of Ireland would stay with AIB and be dealt with as part of the stress test.
Okay. And then in relation to the strategic plans that you've had, you had one in 2010, and the strategic plan then was to pursue all debts owed to the greatest extent possible. But in March 2012, that plan was revised, and it was no longer all the debts, but just those debts necessary for NAMA to repay its borrowings. Why did that change come about? Was that? No,
we're still pursuing the debtors to the maximum extent possible. I suppose, like any strategic plan, over time, and the board, refines its objectives. But I mean, every single day, it's about maximum debt recovery. That's what it's about.
Yeah, but we've discussed this before. I mean, on a couple of occasions, actually, in fact. And the reality is that those debtors who are working with you, you're going to work with them to try and achieve the maximum possible return. But more than likely, it's only going to be once you've had to, pay for the salary for that person if it's involved, once you've had to pay interest costs on the bonds that have been issued by NAMA, once you've paid the running costs, that you're only going to be achieving, in effect, the value that you purchased the loan at. So you're not going to be pursuing them after that. And if they have worked with you, you're going to release them.
Yeah, but on the basis they've handed over their assets to us, and to date, we've for those debtors, as part of the price of working with us, we've achieved 800 million worth of additional assets from those debtors.
Yeah.
If I wish to say, Deputy, that they had another 800 million or 8 billion of assets, but they don't. So, like, it's a full sworn statement of affairs. We engage in asset searches, so we try to pursue every single asset.
But this is a point, I mean, we keep coming back to when we talk about NAMA, is once the 32 billion is achieved, if you like, you're not pursuing debtors beyond that in terms of the discount that was taken when the loans were moved into the banks. Once they achieve what you purchased their loan for, they're
well, as long as it's, but they've also had to give us any unencumbered assets or reverse any transfers.
Yeah.
So if they have no more assets left, and they've consistently worked with us, then you can't get blood out of the stone, unfortunately.
But, I understand that, but that was a shift. That was a shift that happened in 2012.
I don't accept that there was a shift. I think it was just a refinement of the board's language around strategic.
Based on the realities of.
Yeah, I think in terms of it's about, if we could get 74 billion back, we would get 74 billion back. So, but like, there's no instance of a debtor working with NAMA that's going to be retaining assets. That's not the deal. The deal is to put everything on the table. We work with you. We don't bankrupt you. And that's the part of the deal we're working with now.
But it is the case, though, that a debtor could work with you, dispose of those assets, walk away, and then find themselves in control of those assets again. Not directly, but through another company.
I don't believe that's a possibility, because you'll have to find that money from somewhere to be able to buy those assets, and that's probably an unlikely scenario in the scheme of things.
The price you sell the asset at, obviously, the person who's buying it believes that price will increase. Hence why they bought it. They want to make a return on it. So there is more to be gotten out of that asset. You've chosen to dispose of it at a point in time.
Well, definitely, it depends on the market that you're in. I mean, we took a deliberate view that we would flood the Irish, from 2010 to 2013, that there was no point in us flooding the Irish market with Irish property, because it would work against us. And yields in that time are going to go about 9% down to 6%. So it was absolutely the right strategy to do that. In terms of the UK, we sort of said we would sell assets. And we've sold some assets in the UK at 3% yields in London. And, do I believe that a 3% yield is a very good price to sell it at? I certainly do. The person who buys a 3% yield, do they think that it's going to go down to 2% yield or 1% yield? It's a hard one to call. I can't see it.
But a debtor who's working with you, are they in a position to, in terms of you employ them on a salary with the belief that they understand the property the best, and they might be best positioned to help you dispose of that asset? They approach an investment fund and they say, this property NAMA has on its books at X amount, but I believe it can achieve X plus. So buy it off them and I'll come and work for you. So that person walks out of NAMA, and all of a sudden they're back into managing their property, but now in the private sector. That asset then makes a lot more money, and so does that individual.
But I think the reality is that in terms of capital, people who manage capital and things in the day are capitalists are trying to make a return on the asset. They don't hand over their money lightly. So, and we don't sell the asset lightly either, in terms of what we believe to be the best price for it at a particular point in time after opening marketing the asset, and people have an opportunity to see it. So, what if somebody buys an asset and decides, take an example. If somebody buys a loan book of NAMA in relation to a particular